Okay, so I finally broke down and got some Himi Miya jelly gouache. I'm definitely late for this trend, and I have no idea what all the fuss is about, but I decided I wanted to find out, and I figured maybe you'd like to come along for the adventure. As you can see, I got the blue set on Amazon. I found you could purchase this one, a pink version, a mint green version, or a yellow version. And definitely the first thing I noticed about this set was the heft. This container was much heavier than I thought it would be. It definitely has some weight to it, which immediately told me there must be a lot of paint because the actual plastic the box is made of isn't very sturdy or strong. But for $25 I wasn't really expecting much, since I know as far as watercolor at least, one tube of paint can cost as much as all 18 of these. Opening the box up, the lid clips on securely, and inside has a small plastic palette insert with a notched corner for easy removal. Which, as soon as I saw that, I realized it also made a great little place for, you guessed it, a swatch card. So now I'm making one of those as well, hooray! The only way I see to get these out of here is to dump it, so I guess I'll do that next. Then I sorted the paint how I wanted it. From watercoloring, I'm used to starting with yellow, going through the rainbow of bright colors, and then moving on to earth tones, followed by dark neutrals, and white at the end. Once that was decided, I wrote the color name on the bottom of each cup. That was one of the things I was worried about with this set of paint, having removable jelly cup style paints. I was afraid that somehow once they were open, the cups would come out, or for some dumb reason I would take them out, since I'm not always super smart, and I would totally forget what order they went in, because I'm also not very good at remembering things, and then the swatch card wouldn't be accurate or organized properly. So yeah, this is the solution I came up with. Here I have some cold pressed Arches Aquarelle watercolor paper, and I traced the lid insert for sizing, and then measured how big it was so I could divide it up. I measured it both in inches and centimeters. It is 9 3/8 inches by 4 inches, or 24 by 10.5 centimeters. And since the centimeters were easier to divide how I needed, I measured and marked every 4 centimeters on the long side and 3.5 centimeters on the short side to make 3 boxes by 6 boxes so that my swatch card would have the same layout as the paint. Then I used a Unipin fineliner to label each section according to what order the colors are in the box. Once that was done, I opened the containers one at a time and put them in the slots how I wanted them. And okay, I will admit that once they were all opened, and as I did swatches for each one, the texture of this paint is pretty satisfying. If you've ever seen Mariah Elizabeth's channel, you know that when she paints, she often says that her paint is appetizing, like she wants to eat it. And I've never understood that before, but I mean, yeah, I definitely kind of understand a little now. Not that I'd eat paint. Don't eat paint. Come on now. Also, I'm very sure that these paints are dye-based, not pigment-based, because of the price point, of course, and there's no pigment information, of course, but also because of the lifting test I do a little bit later. So I'm gonna say these are definitely not archival. If anyone is interested in a light fastness test with these, just to see how long it takes them to fade in sunlight, or if they'll just fade over time, I would be willing to do one of those. After the swatch card was done, I wanted to do a few tests. First, I wanted to see if these would re-wet at all, since I wasn't sure if this was regular gouache or acrylic gouache. And if they do re-wet, then I wanted to know how easily the colors lifted once they are dry. So I let everything sit for a while, and then I used a brush with clean water, scrubbed a little at the surface, and blotted with a tissue to see how much of the color lifted up. Answer: most of it for all of them. These reactivate really well, which can be good or bad depending on how much you want to glaze colors over each other. And hopefully that means the paints will reactivate easily when they inevitably dry out because of the large open mouth style cup design of the containers. And because they re-wet so easily and don't stain very well, that's another thing that tells me these are dye-based and not pigment-based. But yeah, these colors hardly stain at all for the most part, except for the black. The black wouldn't lift much at all, and I noticed that the gradient when I swatched it didn't have much variation. So the black is very black and doesn't gray out or smoke out nicely with water. It's just black. Anyway, once I did the lifting test for all the swatches, I wanted to know if there was a noticeable difference between the regular white and titanium white, or if they just included two whites, because when you use gouache, much like acrylic paint, you do use a lot of white for mixing, since gouache is, or at least can be, an opaque medium. I wanted to see how badly the color underneath lifted when the whites were applied over top. Answer: they're pretty much the same. They do pick up some of the underlying color if you work it a little too much. The titanium white might be very slightly better for adding highlights, which is what I expected, but that could also be biased because that's what I expected to happen. The difference is really negligible. I'm pretty sure there's just two whites, so you have plenty to mix with, which I'm not complaining about. It turned out to be very handy to have while I was painting, and I can see how you might go through a lot of white if you did several paintings. Speaking of painting, after I finished my swatch card, I separated it from the watercolor block, cut it out, and used some double-sided tape to stick it on the inside cover of the box before I moved on to what I was really excited to try these out with: toned cardstock. This is some 18-point cardstock, so a little on the thicker side, and the color is Grocery Bag. Of all the reasons I was excited to try gouache, being able to paint on cardboard or toned surfaces was definitely at the top of the list. However, I didn't know if the colors would behave on the colored paper the same way they had on the watercolor paper, so I decided to do a quick swatch of them so I'd be able to see what they look like when dry. The end result was basically close enough. They're maybe a little muted and a bit less vibrant, but I decided that was negligible. Mostly I was just impatient to start painting. And here I have a sketch that I prepared earlier of Tifa from Final Fantasy VII. I've been playing the remake because I never actually played the original, and have been told that that is a travesty and a video game rite of passage, so yeah. Originally, I was going to do a Zack because I love him. Even though I never played 7, I did play about half of Crisis Core, and I just love Zack. But I don't think he's in this game, or at least I haven't run into him yet. So I figured he wasn't exactly topical, unfortunately. Another possibility was, of course, Cloud, but I already have a watercolor in progress of him. You might see that a little bit later. And I have ideas for a Sephiroth piece. For a while I thought I might do a carbuncle since the art of him is so freaking cute. But ultimately I decided I wanted to do a human since I'm not exactly good at animals, and right now I'm at Wall Street, so I have TIFA on the brain, and so yeah, that's how we got here. This process was definitely different. You'll probably be able to tell I had no idea what I was doing. I did watch a Skillshare class or two on Gouache, but ultimately decided to just try my own thing. Which, I mean, for better or for worse, really. Layering was interesting. Gouache is really like being halfway between watercolor and acrylic. And a lot of the things that annoy me about acrylic are actually reasons I kind of like gouache. Like not being able to re-wet acrylic paint, and not being able to thin out acrylic paint to a smoother, softer finish, really. Gouache gets a little bit transparent if you add enough water to it. Also, gouache dries down to a matte finish, whereas a lot of the time I find my acrylics drying satin or almost semi-gloss, so that was cool. Anyway, I'll stop rambling, go ahead and watch this 4 hours of my life sped up to a few minutes.
Is it too good to be true? I want this so much, but don't know if I can trust you. My mind's racing fast, trying to find the red flags I'm used to. All these green lights, are they coming too soon? Caught between red and the green, and you, I'm stuck in the blue. Value how I'm feeling. How do you have so much time? Been searching for a reason for why you'd love a chip design. Aren't you listening to me now? Screamed all my secrets, why don't you leave them? Ooh. Is it too good to be true? I want this so much, but don't know if I can trust you. My mind's racing fast, trying to find the red flags I'm used to. All these green lights, are they coming too soon? Caught between red and the green, and you, I'm stuck in the blue. Tell me that I owe you. Don't you need to refuel? The safety when I hold you. You know exactly what to do. Did you fall out of the heavens or crawl up from under? I can't help but wonder. Ooh, oh, is it too good to be true? There's so much, but don't know if I can trust you. My mind's racing fast, trying to find the red flags I'm used to. All these green lights, are they coming too soon? Caught between red and the green, and you, I'm stuck in the blue. Stuck
And here's some close-ups of the finished picture. I was surprised to find that actually firmer synthetic brushes seem to work better with this gouache. At first I tried using my silver black velvet brush in the beginning, but it took in way too much paint and became unmanageable very quickly. But once I switched over to my stiffer set of Grace Art watercolor brushes, I had a much easier time. They handled this medium much better. I have to say this was a very interesting project. Probably the thing I'm most interested in seeing is how well these paints reactivate after they've sat in their case for a month or so, and maybe testing how light fast these are. The paint is good enough quality to play with, and the case and packaging are cute, even if I do think the jelly cup design is a little bit impractical, since it does expose way too much of the paint to open air. Even while I was just painting this one picture, I had them open for about 3 hours or so, and by the end they were already rubbery and crusty on top, so I also wonder if they will dry up like my gouache and my travel palette did, and crack or separate from the plastic cups or fall out. Anyway, let me know if you'd be interested in a follow-up video testing light fastness or reactivation, or letting them sit out in the open air just to see what happens. I'd be happy to give it a try just to see how it went. In the meantime, like this video if you liked my little foray into affordable, cutely packaged gouache. I'm still not entirely sure what all the hype was about. Anyway, subscribe for more creative content, ring the bell so you don't miss an upload, and until next time, I'll talk to y'all later. Bye!
Is it too good to be true? I want this so much, but don't know if I can trust you. My mind's racing fast, trying to find the red flags I'm used to.